Noah lost 2 hours every Tuesday. He knows this because he checked the screen time report on his phone, and it told him, with the particular cruelty of data, that he had spent 2 hours and 17 minutes on Instagram that day. He did not remember any of it. He could not have told you a single thing he had seen. He could not have described one post, one video, one piece of information that had passed through his eyes in those 2 hours and 17 minutes. They were simply gone, not stolen, not taken by anything outside him, just gone, slipped through his fingers, the way water slips through fingers, in small amounts, continuously, until you look down and your hands are empty and you cannot explain where any of it went. He was 31 years old. He worked in marketing at a company he liked well enough, lived in an apartment he liked well enough, had a life that was, by the honest accounting he occasionally applied to it, genuinely good, not perfect, but good. And yet when he tried to identify what he had done with his evenings in the past 3 months, he could produce almost nothing. Some evenings he remembered, a dinner with his wife Lena, a movie they had watched together, a phone call with his parents that had gone long in a good way, but the rest of it, the Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday evenings that were not accounted for by anything memorable, those had the quality of time that had not quite happened, like pages in a book that had been turned without being read. He did not think of himself as someone with a phone problem. Phone problems were for teenagers, for people who could not put the device down at the dinner table. He put it down at the dinner table, usually. He thought of himself as someone who used his phone the way everyone used their phone, to stay informed, to stay connected, to decompress after a long day, which is a phrase that sounds reasonable until you examine what it actually means, which is to spend 2 hours and 17 minutes watching strangers on the internet in a state of low-grade passive consumption that leaves you no more rested than when you started and no less tired than if you had done nothing at all. Decompressing. He had been decompressing for 3 months. The evening that forced honesty was a Saturday in November. He and Lena had been sitting on the couch together. They were both on their phones. This was not unusual. They were in the same room, physically present to each other, doing the particular modern thing of being together while being elsewhere. He was scrolling through something. She was scrolling through something else. The television was on in the background, providing noise for a room that already had 2 people in it. At some point, Lena put her phone face down and looked at him. He felt her look and looked up. She was not angry. She was not making a point. She was just looking at him. "What are you doing?" she asked, not as an accusation, as a genuine question. He looked at his phone. He had been watching a video about a man renovating a kitchen in Portugal. He had no particular interest in kitchen renovation. He had no particular connection to Portugal. "I don't know," he said honestly. She nodded. She picked her phone back up. He put his down. He sat there for a moment. Then he picked his back up. He watched 2 more minutes of the kitchen renovation. Then he put it down again. He looked at the screen time report. He had never looked at it carefully before. He had seen it arrive as a weekly notification, had glanced at it, felt a brief flicker of something, guilt adjacent but not quite guilt, and dismissed it. This time he looked at it properly. Average daily screen time, 4 hours, 12 minutes. He sat with this number, 4 hours and 12 minutes, every day. He thought about what 4 hours and 12 minutes represented. It was more time than he spent at the gym in a week. It was more time than he spent reading in a month. It was enough time every single day to learn a language, to write a book, to build something, to become someone measurably different from who he currently was. And it was going to the kitchen renovation in Portugal, to posts he would not remember tomorrow, to information that arrived and departed without leaving anything behind. He thought about something he had read once, from an old collection of folk wisdom that he could not place precisely. A story about a man who had a well near his house. The water in the well had a faint, strange taste, but the well was convenient, just outside his door, and so he drank from it every day. He ignored the taste. He grew accustomed to it. He told himself it was fine. A traveling physician came through the village and tasted the water and told the man it was mildly poisoned. Not enough to kill, just enough to make him slightly less well than he could be. Slightly less sharp, slightly less energetic, slightly less alive than his full capacity. The man was shocked. He had been drinking from this well for years. Why, the physician asked, when there is a clean river 20 minutes from here? Because it is close, the man said. The physician looked at him. Every day you choose the water that is close over the water that is good, he said. And every day the choice costs you something too small to notice. Until one day you notice all of it at once. Noah sat on the couch with his phone in his hand and the screen time report open. 4 hours and 12 minutes. Every day. The convenient well. He did not throw his phone across the room. He did not make a dramatic declaration. He did not download a blocking app that he would disable within 48 hours, which he had done twice before in the half-hearted way of someone who wants the problem solved but does not want to do the solving. He did something smaller and more specific. He made one rule, not a long list of rules, not a complete digital detox, not the kind of ambitious restructuring that looks good in theory and collapses by Wednesday. One rule, specific enough to be testable. No phone for the first 30 minutes after getting home from work. That was it. 30 minutes. Phone goes on the kitchen counter. Stays there. He did not tell Lena about the rule. He just did it. The first day was uncomfortable in the way of all withdrawal, which is what it was, even if he would not have used that word. He walked through the door. He put the phone on the counter. He stood in the kitchen for a moment with his hands empty, which is a surprisingly strange sensation for someone whose hands have held something for 4 years. He made tea. He stood at the window and looked at the street while the tea brewed. He had not looked at this street, from this window, at this time of day, in longer than he could remember. There was a tree on the corner whose leaves were doing something interesting in the wind. He watched it for a few minutes for no reason except that it was there and his hands were empty and there was nothing else competing for his attention. Lena came home 20 minutes after he did. She found him sitting at the kitchen table with his tea and no phone. She looked at the counter. She looked at him. She sat down. They talked for the 30 minutes. Not about anything important. About her day. About something funny that had happened. About nothing in particular. It was the best 30 minutes he had had in longer than he could precisely identify, not because of what was said, because of the quality of presence in it, because his brain was not simultaneously processing a notification, because when she spoke, he was actually listening rather than half listening while the other half processed a video about Portugal. He was fully somewhere for 30 minutes. He had forgotten what that felt like. The second evening was easier, the third easier still. By the end of the first week, the hands' empty feeling had become something closer to relief, the particular feeling of putting down something heavy that you had been carrying so long you had stopped noticing its weight. He started noticing things. He noticed that the 30 phone-free minutes were followed by a different quality of evening. Not more productive exactly, but more present. More chosen. He was watching television because he wanted to watch it, not because the phone had given way to it through inertia. He was reading because he had picked up the book, not because the app had run out of content and the book was nearby. He started extending the rule, not dramatically, just allowing the 30 minutes to become 40 when it happened naturally, allowing dinner to be phone-free because Lena had stopped bringing hers to the table, and it seemed strange to be the only one holding a device. He still used his phone. He was not attempting to become someone who didn't. He liked his phone for the things it was genuinely good for. Navigation, music, calling people he wanted to talk to, looking up things he genuinely wanted to know. He was just trying to stop letting it use him. There is a difference between using a tool and being used by one. A hammer used well builds something. A hammer you cannot put down breaks everything you touch, including your hands. He thought about the screen time report. He checked it at the end of the first month of the single rule. Average daily screen time, 2 hours, 44 minutes. A reduction of 1.5 hours every day. 45 hours in a month. He sat with that number, 45 hours in a month, that were no longer going to the kitchen in Portugal. He thought about what 45 hours could become. He started reading again. Not in the serious way of someone who has decided to become a reader, but in the quiet way of someone who has found an empty hour and a book they had been meaning to get to, and there is nothing else competing. He read 4 books in the following 6 weeks. He had read 2 books in the previous 2 years. He started sleeping better. This was not something he had expected, but the researchers he discovered when he looked into it were not surprised. The phone before bed had been feeding his nervous system a continuous stream of stimulation right up until the moment he was supposed to rest. The blue light, the information, the low-level emotional engagement of social media, all of it keeping his brain in a state of alert that was the opposite of sleep. Without the phone, the evenings wound down differently. His brain arrived at bedtime having been given some actual quiet. He slept. He woke up not feeling already behind. He thought about the poisoned well, about the man who drank from the convenient source every day for years, not because it was good, but because it was close. He was not fully cured of his convenient well. The pull was still there. He still reached for his phone sometimes in the reflexive way of someone whose hands know a habit the brain has not yet caught up with. But he had put 20 minutes of distance between himself and the well, and in that 20 minutes he had discovered something waiting for him that had been there the whole time. His actual life. The tree on the corner, the tea going warm, the 30 minutes with Lena that had always been available and had always been unchosen. He looked at the 4 hours and 12 minutes now as an inheritance he had been slowly spending without knowing he had it. The question was never whether he had time. He had always had time. The question was what he was willing to put the phone down for. And he had found, once he started asking it honestly, that the answer was almost everything. Almost everything was worth putting it down for. The kitchen renovation in Portugal could wait. His actual life could not.